Brooklyn, New York, 1947. A young woman walks through the doors of a Wall Street law firm for the first time. Nobody could imagine that this discreet secretary, daughter of immigrants, would become a millionaire over 67 years of career, and that her fortune would change hundreds of lives forever. Hey, before we dive into this incredible story, subscribe to the channel right now and hit that bell icon. Trust me, you don't want to miss stories like this. Let's go. This is the real story of Sylvia Bloom, and I bet you will comment your opinion about her at the end of this video. Sylvia Bloom was born in 1919 in Brooklyn. Her parents were immigrants from Eastern Europe who came to the United States in search of the American dream. They arrived at Ellis Island with nothing but hope and determination. Like millions of other immigrants, they believed that in America, anything was possible if you worked hard enough. But life wasn't easy. In 1929, when Sylvia was only 10 years old, the Great Depression devastated America. Families lost everything overnight. Banks closed. Businesses failed. Unemployment reached 25%. The Bloom family struggled like everyone else. There were days when food was scarce, days when the future seemed impossible to imagine. But Sylvia's parents taught her something valuable. Education was the only way out. No matter how poor they were, education was the one thing nobody could take away from her. The years of sacrifice. To survive, Sylvia had to work during the day and study at night. She completed her college degree at Hunter College this way, with pure determination and sacrifice. Can you imagine? After working 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours a day, she would go to night classes. While other young people were enjoying their youth, Sylvia was building her future. She took notes. She studied on subway rides. She never complained. She just kept going, day after day, year after year. This discipline, this incredible work ethic, would become the foundation of everything she accomplished later in life. Wall Street, the beginning of genius. In 1947, Sylvia got a position at the law firm Cleary Gottlieb Steen and Hamilton, one of the most prestigious on Wall Street. This was a big deal. Wall Street in the 1940s was an exclusive world. It was dominated by men from wealthy families who went to Ivy League schools. For a woman, especially a daughter of immigrants who worked her way through college, getting a job there was extraordinary. Today, this firm has more than 1,300 lawyers spread across 16 countries. But back then, it was just the beginning. The firm had just been founded, and Sylvia was one of the very first employees. And here, my friend, Sylvia's genius begins. The brilliant strategy. As an executive secretary, she managed her boss's entire lives, including their personal investments. Back in those days, secretaries weren't just typing letters. They were managing calendars, handling phone calls, organizing files, and yes, helping with personal finances. She would sit at her desk and watch these brilliant lawyers make investment decisions. She would type up their stock orders. She would file their brokerage statements. She would see which companies they were investing in and why. And that's when she had a brilliant idea. Every time a lawyer at the firm bought stocks, let's say 1,000 shares of AT&T, Sylvia would call her own broker and buy 100 shares of the same company. If her boss bought IBM, she bought IBM. If he bought General Electric, she bought General Electric. If he invested in emerging technologies, so did she. She was essentially getting free investment advice from some of the smartest financial minds on Wall Street. Pause here and tell me in the comments, do you think this is ethical? Comment your opinion now. The power of patience. Of course, Sylvia didn't have the same money as the millionaire lawyers, but she had something more valuable: information and patience. She was literally copying the investment strategies of Wall Street's best investors. Think about it. These lawyers had access to insider knowledge, market trends, financial analysis. They knew which companies were about to grow, which industries were emerging. And Sylvia, she just quietly followed their lead. No fancy MBA degree, no expensive financial advisors, just observation and discipline. Year after year, decade after decade. Through the 1950s boom, through the 1960s growth, through the 1970s challenges, through the 1980s bull market, through every market cycle, Sylvia kept investing. She never panicked during crashes. She never sold during downturns. She just kept buying, holding, and reinvesting dividends. Living below her means. But here's what's most impressive. Sylvia never changed her lifestyle. She married Raymond Margolius, a New York firefighter who later became a teacher. The couple lived in a rented apartment in Brooklyn. Let me repeat that. Rented. Even when she had millions in the bank, she never bought a house. She never moved to Manhattan. She stayed in her modest Brooklyn apartment. No mansions, no luxury cars, no designer clothes, no fancy vacations, no country club memberships, no ostentation whatsoever. She wore nice clothes, but nothing extravagant. She enjoyed simple pleasures: music, reading, spending time with family. Not even her own husband knew about the fortune Sylvia was silently accumulating. Can you imagine keeping that secret for decades? Most people, when they get money, they want to show it off. They want people to know. They want recognition. But not Sylvia. She lived as if she was still that working-class girl from Brooklyn, because in her heart, that's exactly who she was. September 11th, 2001. Sylvia was 84 years old and still working. Yes, you heard that right. 84 years old and still going to the office every single day. When chaos took over New York after the terrorist attacks, when the World Trade Center towers fell just blocks away from her office, they told her to go home immediately. The streets were filled with smoke, debris, and panic. Everyone was running, screaming, trying to escape. You know how she went back? By bus. She didn't take a taxi, a public bus. She waited in line with everyone else. She paid her fare. She sat down and rode home like any other day. Her niece, Jane Lokshin, tells the story to show who she really was, a woman of values, regardless of how much money she had. Even in a crisis, even at 84 years old, even with millions in the bank, she took the bus. Now tell me, would you take a taxi or bus in that situation? Comment below. 67 years of work. Sylvia worked until she was 96 years old. 96! Let that sink in. Most people retire at 65. Sylvia worked for 31 more years after that. She loved her job. She loved the routine. She loved feeling useful and productive. Work gave her life meaning and purpose. When she finally retired in 2013, few knew what was coming. By then, she had worked at Cleary Gottlieb for 67 consecutive years. 67 years in the same place, same desk, same building, same dedication. In 2016, at 96 years old, Sylvia passed away peacefully in a nursing home. Her funeral was small and simple, just like she would have wanted. Colleagues from the law firm came, family members gathered, Friends shared memories. And that's when the secret was revealed. The shocking fortune. Sylvia had accumulated more than $9 million. $9 million. Divided between 3 brokerage firms and 11 banks. Her family was absolutely shocked. Her niece Jane said, "I knew she had enough money to live comfortably, but I had absolutely no idea of the extent of her wealth." Think about that. Her own niece, who was close to her, had no clue. Even her coworkers at the law firm where she worked for 67 years were absolutely stunned. Paul Hyams from the Human Resources Department said she never— Think about that. Her own niece, who was close to her, had no clue. Even her coworkers at the law firm where she worked for 67 years were absolutely stunned. Paul Hyams from the Human Resources Department said, "She never talked about money. She never lived a life of luxury. She didn't show off or want attention." One colleague said, "I saw her almost every day for decades, and I never suspected she had that kind of money." How do you hide $9 million from everyone? How do you live with that secret and never let it slip? The greatest surprise. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. Sylvia's will revealed something extraordinary, something that shocked everyone even more than the fortune itself. She left small amounts to relatives and friends, but the majority of her fortune went to charity. $6.24 million went to the Henry Street Settlement, a foundation that provides social programs, healthcare, and educational support for underprivileged people in New York's Lower East Side. It was the largest individual donation in the foundation's 125-year history. David Garza, the executive director at the time, said, "We were all speechless, simply stunned. Nothing like this had ever happened to us." The donation created a permanent fund in Sylvia and Raymond's name. Every year, the interest from this fund helps thousands of people access services they couldn't afford otherwise. Comment now. What would you do with $9 million? I want to know. Education, the gift that keeps giving. But there's more, because Sylvia wasn't done giving. She donated another $2 million to Hunter College, the same college where she studied at night while working during the day all those decades ago. This money created the Bloom Markleese Scholarship Fund, named after her and her late husband Raymond. This fund provides full scholarships for low-income young people who want to study but can't afford it. Not just tuition, full scholarships including books, housing, food, everything. Hundreds of students have already benefited from Sylvia's generosity. Students who, like her, come from humble immigrant families and dream of a better education. Students who work during the day and study at night. Students who know what it's like to struggle, to sacrifice, to fight for every opportunity. These students are living proof that Sylvia's legacy goes far beyond money. She gave them hope. She gave them opportunity. She gave them a future. Her true character. Her niece Jane Lockshin, who managed the estate, said something beautiful. Aunt Sylvia, who earned her college degree in night classes, always valued education and wanted her estate to benefit those with limited educational opportunities. Jane also said she would have hated all this attention. She was a very private person, but she would have accepted it knowing it would help these institutions. At Sylvia's funeral in 2016, a colleague said, "She would have been an excellent lawyer. She was intelligent, analytical, patient, wise, and loyal." Those who knew her highlighted her dry irony, her contagious laugh, and her radiant smile. But perhaps most importantly, her character, her humility, her generosity, her quiet strength. Someone who knew her for 40 years said, "Sylvia never forgot where she came from. She never forgot what it was like to struggle." The lessons we can learn. So what can we learn from Sylvia Bloom's incredible story? First lesson, you don't need to be rich to start investing. Sylvia had a secretary's modest salary, but she invested consistently. Even small amounts, invested regularly over time, can grow into something significant. Second lesson, patience is the real secret to wealth. Sylvia invested for 67 years. She didn't look for quick profits or get-rich-quick schemes. She didn't try to time the market. She just stayed invested through good times and bad times. Third lesson, live below your means. Even with millions in the bank, Sylvia lived simply and saved most of what she earned. She didn't inflate her lifestyle every time she got a raise. She didn't buy things to impress people. She stayed grounded. And fourth, perhaps the most important lesson of all, money is a tool to do good. Sylvia could have left her fortune to distant relatives or spent it on luxuries she never enjoyed. Instead, she chose to change lives. She chose to give opportunities to people who reminded her of herself. The true legacy. Today, when we walk through Wall Street, we see luxury cars, expensive suits, and ostentation everywhere. We see people trying to look rich, designer logos, expensive watches, flashy lifestyles broadcast on social media. But Sylvia Bloom's true legacy isn't in bank accounts or stock portfolios. It's in every young person who can go to college because of her scholarship, students who will become doctors, teachers, engineers, entrepreneurs, all because Sylvia believed in them. It's in every family that received help from the Henry Street Settlement Foundation, families that got health care, job training, childcare, and hope. But it's also in the lesson that a simple secretary can be wiser than many millionaires, that true wealth isn't measured by how much you have, but what you do with what you have. Sylvia never made headlines during her life. She never gave interviews. She never wrote books or gave speeches. She just quietly did the right thing day after day for 67 years. And in the end, her legacy is greater than most people who spent their lives seeking fame and recognition. Final reflection. Sylvia Bloom lived 96 years. She worked 67 of them in the same place. She never sought fame or recognition. She was just a secretary, just a daughter of immigrants, just a woman who studied at night and worked during the day. But her story teaches us something powerful. True wealth isn't measured by what you have, but what you do with what you have. Sylvia answered that question beautifully. She lived with integrity. She invested wisely. She saved consistently. And when her time came, she gave generously. So I ask you, what will your legacy be? When you're gone, what will people remember about you? Will they remember what you owned or what you gave? Will they remember how much you had or how many lives you touched? Call to action. Now it's time for you to comment. Tell me, 1, what impressed you most about Sylvia's story? Was it her discipline, her secrecy, her generosity? 2, would you have the patience to invest for 67 years? Or would you want to see results faster? 3, if you had $9 million, would you donate most of it to charity or would you spend it differently? Comment your answers now. I read every single comment and I want to hear your perspective on this incredible story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration today. Share it with someone who's working hard and needs to know that patience and discipline really do pay off. Thank you for watching. Sylvia's story reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they sit quietly at a desk, do their job with excellence, and change the world in ways nobody expects. See you in the next video.